in the old folks tell, it ain't gonna rain no more.
Hi everybody, I'm Kanalkanut.
And I'm Mr. Shoes.
And today we're back with another hiker grab bag. Hiking poles. We carried hiking poles with us from Georgia all the way to Katahdin. We found them to be one of the biggest helps we had. The fact that they alleviated some pressure off your back, took some weight off your hips and knees. They carried us smoothly down the trail for the longest time. We thought today we'd share with you just why they're so useful. You can go with a hiking staff, very simple wood. You can carve it yourself, or there are people who do make them for hikers. A single pole, just a walking stick of sorts. Cheap set of poles found in any sports retail store, or you could spend well over $100 on lightweight carbon fiber or metal poles.
If you've never hiked with poles before, you might think that making an investment of over $100 on a pair of poles is excessive, and that's what we thought as well. We looked at some cheap and cheerful poles that were about $20 to $40 online, and we thought that that would do the job. They're a little heavier, and the materials are a little budget. These are plastic handles here. The straps are just kind of budget straps that you'd find, and you get what you pay for when you're buying poles. If you spend well over $100 on a pair of poles, most of the time those companies are going to stand behind their product and replace them for free if you damage them. And that's what happened with our poles. By the end of the Appalachian Trail, they were destroyed, and they were repaired several times on our way up the trail. And at the end, we sent them our dilapidated kind of monster poles, and they sent us brand new poles back. So that investment is going to be in a lifetime worth of hiking poles, where if you break one of your cheap and cheerful poles, you're going to have to replace them. And if these poles are $40 each, if you replace them once, you're already close to buying a pair of these, and you have the benefit of the ultra lightweight material.
Now, coming back to what Mr. Shue said about the trail damaging our poles, we had to do several repairs with lengths we found along the trail. For instance, Mr. Shue's bottom half of his pole had been completely destroyed, and we came across one dug in the mud on a mountaintop. So he took it for his own and attached it to his pole, and we went on our merry way. In one of the towns we stopped in, I had a shattered pole, and we replaced it with a silver tubing, which contrasted heavily with the black. It earned its nickname C-3PO. We also had our friend Shakedown with us through the 100-mile wilderness. We were coming down a rock scramble, and he had his cheap and cheerful poles with him. He stood on a wobbly rock, which he had been warned before about. His pole bent almost at a right angle as he came down, and was stuck with it through the rest of the 100-mile wilderness.
If you decide to take some extendable poles with you, and once you decide on your budget, you're going to want to decide on the type of mechanism that's going to extend your poles. Now, traditionally, you're going to find poles that have a twist, extend, and twist compression. Some of these have a shock absorption spring or elastomer or an air spring in here that's going to allow for some shock absorption. You'll find a lot of poles have these, but they're a little less reliable, and they've been replaced by the major manufacturers with a quick release system like this. Now, these quick release systems are good because you can find a tension that works for you, very quick to adjust the size. It generally doesn't have a shock absorbing mechanism inside, but they're easily repaired along the way. If you lose this lock nut, which happened a couple of times with us, you can replace it with a metric style nut that you can find in most hardware stores.
With any pole you choose, you have to be aware of the wear and tear that comes with it. In the drastically changing temperatures on the trail, we have found ourselves snapping these little clips in half, meaning our pole length was stuck where it was.
Also available are ultralight carbon fiber poles. They do not have an adjusting mechanism, as they are held together with a tension wire running straight through them. They're very expensive, and we could not justify the expense as they were not adjustable. But once we found a workable length for our poles along our hike, we didn't adjust our poles all that much anyway, so this wouldn't be a factor in choosing new poles.
Out here in the field, your choice on what pole to use or not to use a pole at all comes down to the terrain that you're in. We opted to use 2 poles so that we can have optimal balance and stability as we're going through muddy or uneven terrain.
If you don't want to be over encumbered with 2 poles, the single pole with no strap is very good if you want that support and stability on this terrain, but don't want to have to carry the extra weight of a pole, or you feel like it's annoying just dangling there on your arm. And if you don't want to carry a pole at all, the trail is bountiful with sticks like this that you can carry through the hard parts, and when you're done, just simply toss it aside.
There's often a question of whether to use a rubber tip on the end of your pole, which is usually sold separately, or use the carbide tip that comes as standard. The rubber pole is good when you're walking around town or working on concrete or even through the rocks. The issue is walking with your rubber tips through the mud means that you might get an issue where the tip comes off and you've lost your tip. That's happened with a number of sets of ours, and you want to keep that in mind.
Now, some people haven't used poles before, whether that be skiing or hiking previously, so some of you might not know how to use your straps properly. The proper way to use your straps are like this. You come under, up, and over like that, so your hand rests on the strap. Your hand resting on the strap meaning you won't have to have a death grip on your pole to keep a good grip on it, so you can walk with them. You can just sort of let them hang and still have that loose grip, which is really nice. It also gives you a little extra support for your arm as well, make it a bit more comfortable hiking. Most straps are adjustable. You can pull them up and pull them or push them however far you need to fit your hand, but some poles, like the previous walking stick we showed, do not have straps, so you want to keep that in mind when considering what pole.
Having a hiking pole gives you the versatility of finding different ways and different routes. Also, you can adjust your grips on your poles depending on what you need in terms of balance and stability. There's a big debate on whether to keep the baskets that come stock on your poles or to remove them. When you're going through mud like that, you'll know that the baskets are displacing that surface area and giving you a bit more stability, while this pole without the basket buries itself into the mud even deeper.
It's really down to preference. We decided to keep our baskets because once we did lose them to the mud, we gathered quite a collection of dead leaves and other shrubbery on our poles, and we didn't get that great traction in the mud anymore because we just sink in and our pole would get stuck and we'd have to walk back, pick it up, and continue.
When you're hiking up the hill, having adjustable poles means that you can adjust the height of your poles to a shorter length to make it easier for you to climb with the steepness of the angle. Now, adjusting your poles every time you come to an incline might seem like a pain in the butt, so we found a height of our poles that would work on uphills as well as downhills.
Conversely, coming down the hill, you want your pole a bit longer and holding out in front of you so it supports your weight as you come down and you won't topple over. Whatever poles you do choose to bring, you have to make sure they're in good shape. For example, our buddy Totem brought a pair of his old poles and they broke on the way up Springer on his first day.
We did some slack packing in New York, and we got out of the car at the trailhead and we realized we had left our hiking poles behind. And we said, oh, we can hike without them, it'll be fine. And we were a good mile in before we realized that we missed our poles. We found nice straight sticks in the woods and we used those as our hiking poles for the day.
If you have an open mind and you have some ingenuity, you can always find something that will work for you. I became a bit dependent on the hiking poles, as when we left our hiking poles at home on the slack pack day, I became painfully aware on how uneven the footing on the trail was and became very cautious about my ankles.
I'm a lifelong hiker and I didn't use hiking poles until we did our Appalachian Trail Thru-hike. But I can tell you that having hiking poles let us do infinitely more miles per day than we would have otherwise.
I'm Kanalkanut.
And I'm Mr. Shoes.
Everyone on the trail has their opinion.
And this is ours.
Oh, it ain't gonna rain no more, no more. It ain't gonna rain no more. But how in the world can the old folks tell it ain't gonna rain no more?
Today is the 1-year anniversary of our depart from Springer Mountain, Georgia. We'd like to wish everyone who has a trail anniversary today a good job, and we hope you go out and have a hike just to remember all the work you put in and congratulations.